there. I thought in these couple weeks that we aren't meeting, and even beyond that, it might be kind of fun to look through the book blended together so that we're all on the same page. Bad English teacher joke. And wanted to just start with the intro in chapter one in this discussion. And at the end of my little slideshow, basically I'm going to go through the section because I know that your time is valuable and you may not have time to dig into the book like you want to yet. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview. I'm going to send you to look for one thing in the chapter one, kind of like a scavenger hunt, and then we'll go into Schoology to add our discussion board. But before we start, I've got to share this with you. Every time we start talking about blended learning, I think of this movie we went to see with the kids and this Terry Crews video. So you got to just watch this with me and see if we can get this in our head as we're blending our learning.
You are blending. Yes, you be touching. Like wine and baboon. All right, let's go get our beef on. And that mama booty. All right, thank you. Oh, anyway, I think they're blending over there. Come now. Come now. They're blending over here. Yes.
Okay, thank you for humoring me and watching that craziness, but I think we're blending over here. I think we're doing it. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion. I think that one thing that we notice in all of education is that there tends to be buzzwords, right? And sometimes we get a little annoyed with buzzwords, but I wanted to share some of the buzzwords with you today that are in the introduction, and you really don't want to miss the introduction. You know, some books, the introduction is fluff. The introduction in this book to me is really key in sort of getting us on the same page with where this idea of blended learning even comes from so that we can kind of wrap our brain around it and look at some key terms with blended learning. The first one is disruptive innovation, and this comes out of the Clayton Christensen Institute. Clayton Christensen is a Harvard business professor, and that's where he started his whole theory of disruptive innovation. The idea that innovation that sticks and products that really work and are marketable and make money for people are usually the results of some sort of disruption that they've keyed into. And he brings us into education in that, you know, online education is definitely disruptive, right? When you bring in technology into your classroom, there's a certain amount of disruption, especially when you're going beyond just using a tech tool and you're really reworking your whole outcome based on using online innovations. So we are going to create a stir, and disruption isn't always well received. We've talked about that as well, and he really does a nice job of kind of laying out why disruption and also things that were disruptive. I remember, I'm going to date myself for a second, I remember in college learning about email, and my husband and I talked about this recently. We actually both had the same impression. Yeah, right. People are really going to use that. Like, people were saying, oh, it's going to disrupt mail as we know it. And we both rolled our eyes because none of our friends had email accounts at that point. We had to set them up for classes because it was part of our technology module or whatever. And we had a few professors that wanted us to see what they felt like professionally. And now I have a box of note cards that I have every intention of sending in real mail, but I'm much more likely to email, right? So it's a disruptive innovation. He used the example of online taxes, or even things like department stores that market lower, like Target or Walmart, and what they have done, whether you like it or not, to department store industries. We come out of a factory model of education, the education model that we know right now to be, you move up age, grade, everybody's grouped together, comes out of the Industrial Revolution, and it is basically it works. It worked at first, especially because we didn't need a great we needed basic skills to come out of education. We weren't looking for, there were only about 15% of jobs, I believe, were really deeper knowledge jobs at that point, and that has changed. Also, we have education has launched. We have enrollment across the United States in education. We have a system, and so I think the factory model education got education as we know it off the ground, but I think arguably it's not working. It doesn't work for the individual. We know that all kids learn to read at different paces. They learn to write at different paces. They learn to do math and science concepts at different levels and paces. And so now we have them in these neat little tidy age groups, but we are not neat and tidy learners. Student-centered learning, personalized learning, and competency-based learning all kind of fall into the same category. And I remember when my dad was serving on school board when I was in junior high and high school, and there was a big uproar about outcomes-based education and how it was going to ruin the world. And I think we still sometimes feel a little bit uneasy. I know I do when I think of student-centered learning, even in the context of our peer group of blended learning specialists. It's hard to know my role when we're really talking about letting the learners lead. And some of you have talked about that where I'm like, I don't really know what to do. So it's not a comfortable place for us to be as teachers. It's not how we were trained and it's not how we were modeled to. But in order for students to really engage and show ownership in their learning and to really show progress, we're going to need to personalize their education. And when we talk about competency-based learning, we're talking about promoting them to the next task based on their ownership and their mastery of that learning. So blended learning is ideally the engine that powers this stuff, because as classes are set up now, to personalize and competency base our classes would be virtually impossible, so we have to rethink it. In the textbook, it talks about the tipping point in education. And when I first started reading this textbook, I actually had gotten it on as a perusal copy for another course I was teaching. And I got to this page, and I got so excited that I emailed Misty, because I had talked to her months ago and remembered this logo from our school that talked about responsibility, opportunity, flexibility, and accessibility. And wouldn't you know, that is what blended learning is about. It's about personalization. It's about the desire for accessibility. It's the desire to be responsible with our monies and be responsible with our role as teachers, and to teach responsibility to our students. So all of these things, I love how they reflect each other, and I think that's why we are in such a good position to continue this endeavor and really grow it. Okay, and the book next talks about building a field of experts, and they actually say, once you read this book, you are the expert. I don't know if I'll ever feel like an expert at anything. Maybe it's my definition of expert, but I do believe that in the intent of showing an expertise and leading and taking risks in an area, we are it. You are the experts, you are the leaders. What we really want to do is move beyond an understanding of what blended learning is and how to do it, but also be able to answer the why. So I think these are the three big questions, but I think it's driven by this why. And the book Blended also talks about that. When I'm saying I think, I'm thinking this, and the book is saying it as well. Okay, moving on. So in the first chapter, it talks about taking the best of online learning and the best of face-to-face learning, and basically you've got blended learning. So I'm not going to read the slide to you. You've seen this before, but I think this key part is, how do you know if it's blended learning? Well, it's when students have control of some element of when, how, and at what pace they learn. Blended learning is not the same thing as technology-rich teaching, and I think this is where it gets sticky. For me, I think it's easy for me to get really excited about all the technology tools, and that's part of it, because we've got to have those things in order to blend learning. But what do we want to do with it? What do we really want to teach? What are our objectives? And leading with that is very important to blended learning. And this little poster, I don't know if you can read it very well, but basically, what do you want kids to do with it? Is our end objective to create prezzies, start blogs, create Wordles, design flashcards online, No, those are tools, but we do want to have them raise awareness of their own learning, of the world around them. We want them to start their own conversations and lead well in conversations. We want to help them both find answers and find questions, to join in collaboration, to really drive for change and be good communicators, right? And so these things are important, but these things on this side are what get them jobs, right? What make them good contributors into their society and their environments. Okay, these are not real clear, but these pictures are all in the text, and these are models of blended learning. And I'm having trouble with my screen, and my slides don't match up here. Sorry about that. Basically, you have the brick and mortar, that face-to-face learning, we have online learning, and it creates blended learning. And we're going to mostly camp out on these rotation models, but I want to throw these others in because we do those now to some degree, and we're going to continue doing them. And this is where our discussion is going to start this week. Looking at these different models, which model best fits your teaching objectives, the learning objectives, the type of class you're teaching, the students that you're teaching, your personal style. Basically, we're looking at the learner's experience and the teacher's experience, and which one's going to fit. And of course, then we also have the physical. I don't want to always look at a deficit model, so I don't want to say physical limitations, but our physical parameters for right now, right? This is the station rotation model, and this is one I always say reminds me, we talked about this a little bit already, this one always reminds me of the elementary classrooms because I feel like they really do this well. It's where students basically move from station to station, quite literally. There's a teacher over here with a small group, and one group is over here maybe working on a blend space or some other online tool. We have a group over here working in maybe in other stations or in collaborative activities, and then they rotate. The teacher may direct that rotation, or it may be a student-led option, which is a slightly different model. This is an example of a lab rotation. Again, this is only one way to do it, but this would be if you have like this shows different subjects meeting in different areas, and then how it would rotate. But and it shows how you could combine classes. Like this is a math science class, it's a sociology social studies class. But when they come to the lab, they can learn together. But obviously, the idea here is direct instruction, and then you go into a learning lab situation. This is a flipped model where we are doing some online instruction and content, and then we do practice and projects when we're together. And this is an individual rotation model, similar to the station rotation that we talked about at the beginning, but this is a little bit more, gives students a little bit more choice. My one son's preschool did this, and the teacher would say the one thing you have to get done today is, and she would give them one mandatory station, and the rest was led by them. And this is pretty prescriptive in terms of how many students to how many instructors, and this one does show it as multiple instructors available to students. Slightly different than what we have, but maybe if we would think about combining classes for a project, this might be a model we would think of. Again, these are all in the textbooks, you can look at them better. A flex model is I think of like the Hilliard Innovation Learning Center. And by the way, each of these models has a video that goes with it in the book, and I'd really recommend that once you think you've chosen your model or two models, that you watch the video using your QR reader. This reminds me of the Innovation Center because it has like a social space, a collaborative space, there's space for breakout and interventions and direct instruction, and then like a big computer lab. I think we could imitate though that within our spaces as well. It might take a little bit more planning, let's say. We couldn't maybe hold this all within our classrooms, but I do think there's some elements of this that could work in our classrooms. And that's the other thing I want to bring up is that as you're thinking of these, don't feel like you have to be married to just one. You can make your own model. These are just ones that when I heard Horn speak, he just said these were ones that they're most seeing emerge as the most common. The a la carte model is sort of like what we do maybe with our online classes that we offer to students kind of as an individual thing where they are at school most of the day, but they maybe take one online class that's either facilitated by one of our teachers or possibly taught by a teacher within that online setting. So, Enrich Virtual is where students are basically doing both. And I'm not going to go into that much. I don't think that's really us. Here is my final slide.